Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye is set to leave for New York for talks with world leaders on sustainable development and other global challenges. She also warns North Korea against launching a provocation. Satellite photos show new activity at North Korea's nuclear test site. It's unclear whether it's linked to maintenance or preparations for a bomb test. Plus, the leaders of the United States and China are holding a private dinner in Washington ahead of their summit on Friday. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 25th of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, President Park Geun-hye embarks on a trip to the US this Friday for talks with world leaders and to give a couple of speeches at the United Nations. She'll lay out South Korea's policies on a number of issues, including North Korea. For a look at what local experts think the president will cover in New York, here's our Kim Ji-yeon.
During her trip to the U.S., President Park Geun-hye is expected to make at least 8 speeches that will include policies directed towards North Korea. The timing of her speeches is critical as there's growing speculations over further provocations from Pyongyang, including a possible rocket launch in October, marking the 70th anniversary of the founding of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party. The presidential office of Cheongwade said Thursday that it's too early to say for certain what she'll mention during her trip. But the consensus among local experts seems to be that the president will elaborate on her two-track policy concerning the North. 2 local experts also told Arirang News that they expect the president will strongly warn the regime from engaging in further provocations, while also stating that it's important the 2 Koreas work together in the humanitarian front.
I expect the president to call for inter-Korean cooperation concerning the resumption of reunions of families separated during the Korean War. She's expected to say that she doesn't want the reunions to come to a standstill or become a political controversy if North Korea launches a missile in October.
I expect the president to deliver a strong message towards North Korea so that it could refrain from further nuclear weapons development, as such actions will be a clear violation of UN resolutions. She is also expected to call for tougher sanctions if the North continues to engage in further provocations.
The 2 researchers added the president is to reiterate the importance of a reunified Korea, as she did in a keynote address to the UN General Assembly last year, and gained widespread support from the international community. Among President Park's remarks was that reunification would highly contribute in promoting peace and security in Northeast Asia. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And President Park Geun-hye has warned North Korea that it will pay a high price if it makes a provocation that violates UN Security Council resolutions. President Park made the remarks during an interview with Bloomberg ahead of her trip to New York to attend the 70th session of the UN General Assembly. She also stressed that the South Korean government is devoting all of its diplomatic efforts to stop Pyongyang engaging in hostile acts. Following up on their pledge to hold one-on-one talks on a regular basis, the top diplomats of Korea and Japan will meet next week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. Seoul's foreign ministry says Korean Foreign Minister Im Byung-se will hold discussions with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida next Wednesday, this a day after trilateral foreign minister talks between Korea, Japan and the United States. One of the top agenda items is sure to be Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Seoul says summit talks can only take place if Tokyo issues a genuine apology. The 2 sides will also set the agenda for a planned trilateral summit with China that's been tentatively penciled in for late October or early November. Now, it was all smiles in Washington when US President Barack Obama welcomed his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping a few hours ago ahead of their private dinner at Blair House. US officials say the dinner is an opportunity for the 2 leaders to share views in a relatively casual setting while fine-tuning the details of their summit on Friday. US Vice President Joe Biden and US National Security Advisor Susan Rice are also at the dinner. The conversation is likely to be centered around China's alleged cyber espionage on the US, Beijing's military build-up in the South China Sea, as well as efforts to denuclearize North Korea. In fact, the Wall Street Journal cited the US Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes as saying that Obama will propose that the two countries work in unison to defuse tensions with Pyongyang. New activity has been spotted at North Korea's main nuclear test site. US-based website 38 North says that satellite imagery taken from September 18th indicates new activity at the Punggye-ri site. This is where North Korea conducted its 3 previous nuclear tests. You can see the photos there. It shows 4 large vehicles parked near the tunnel entrance with camouflage netting concealing the entrance at the west portal area. In addition to this, an area in front of a tunnel dug before 2012 has actually been widened at the south portal area as well. Now, this is where many speculate a possible 4th nuclear test could be carried out. 38 North, however, says the purpose of the recent activities at this site are, we must stress, unclear at this point. 38 North says it could, in fact, be related to maintenance. Staying with North Korea, and the country's leader, Kim Jongun, will award a special bonus to citizens and military personnel to mark the 70th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. The North Korean Central News Agency reported Friday that the bonus will amount to 100% of monthly salaries for all working citizens and also include those receiving pensions, subsidies and scholarships. The North has distributed items such as blankets and wall clocks in the past, but this represents the first time Pyongyang has provided cold, hard cash to its people. The agency added that the bonus is being awarded for loyal service and devotion to the party. It's the most serious loss of life at the Hajj pilgrimage in a quarter of a century. More than 700 people were killed and 800 injured near Mecca on Thursday when massive crowds surged forward, trampling hundreds of people underfoot. Son Jung-in has more.
More than 2 million Muslims are estimated to be taking part in this year's Hajj pilgrimage. The annual tradition draws people from around the world to the holy city of Mecca to perform a series of rituals and prayers aimed at erasing past sins. But before reaching the city, a stampede broke out when 2 large groups of pilgrims going in opposite directions collided at an intersection of 2 narrow streets. Over 4,000 rescue workers and 220 ambulances were dispatched in response to the disaster. Early reports said over 710 people died and more than 860 were injured, but officials fear the death toll may rise further as bodies are still being counted. The Korean embassy in Riyadh has confirmed that no South Korean nationals were hurt. In a live televised speech, Saudi King Salman ordered a review of the kingdom's plans for the annual Hajj pilgrimage, which has been the scene of numerous deadly stampedes. He also called for a swift investigation into the disaster.
We have instructed the concerned bodies to investigate and provide us with the result as soon as possible.
Iran has blamed the Saudi government for the tragedy that also killed at least 89 Iranians. The Saudi government says the fault lies with the pilgrims as they did not follow movement instructions. This latest tragedy comes just 2 weeks after a crane collapsed in the same area, killing more than 100 people. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Pope Francis is now in New York after delivering a historic speech to US Congress. Speaking to a packed house on Thursday, the Pope focused on ways to help the poor and marginalized. He also challenged Congress on social and economic injustices, as well as on immigration. The Pope stressed social structures should be focused on restoring hope to the American people. Pope Francis is the first pontiff ever to address a joint session of the US Senate and House of Representatives. The Pope will address the UN General Assembly in New York on Friday local time. US Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen says she expects a rate hike to happen before the end of the year. Speaking at a news conference in Washington on Thursday, Yellen said inflation will gradually move up to the Fed's target of 2% once oil prices rise and the dollar weakens. Now, this was Yellen's first speech since the Fed voted last week to keep interest rates at their current record low of near zero. She added that current global economic risks will not affect the central bank's plans to raise its key interest rate by December. Yellen also said the central bank would need to tighten its policy in a timely fashion and at a gradual pace. The emissions scandal that has engulfed Volkswagen is getting more toxic by the day. In addition to the deepening legal fallout, the German automaker's emissions fraud is causing European countries to bow to pressure to rerun tests on cars. Shin Se-min reports.
The diesel emissions fraud scandal at Germany's Volkswagen is worsening. Another management change has occurred, with Volkswagen tipped to place Porsche boss Matthias Müller in charge just a day after Chief Executive Martin Winterkorn resigned over the crisis. The company will also dismiss the R&D chiefs of Audi and Porsche and its top manager in the US, where the manipulation to circumvent diesel emission rules was first discovered. Stocks have fallen nearly 30% since news of the automaker's Clean Air Act violations broke last Friday, and more than 50% less than the 52-week high in March. Credit ratings agencies Standard & Poor's and Moody's both warned of a possible reduction of the beleaguered company's ratings. While dealers in the U.S. are struggling with the remaining vehicles in stock, angry customers are demanding compensation from their local dealerships.
In theory, any VW customer can find a way to sue for damages. Even pedestrians, residents, and neighbors can claim they've been affected. I think there will be an avalanche of lawsuits.
And the fallout is affecting other European automakers as well. What started with Volkswagen has prompted the European Union to urge all 28 member nations to launch their own investigations.
We have also been informed that in Europe, vehicles with 1.6 and 2-liter diesel engines are affected by the manipulations that are being talked about.
Already, shares of BMW have plunged after a report showed the diesel version of its X3 sport utility vehicle emitting more than 11 times the European limit for air pollution. The reality is that this is just a beginning of increased scrutiny of the entire auto industry and its methods for testing vehicles. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korean consumers are growing more optimistic, rebounding from the fallout of the recent outbreak of the Middle East respiratory syndrome. The Bank of Korea says its consumer sentiment index came to 103 in September. That's 1 point higher than the previous month, and it marks the third straight month of improvement. A reading above 100 indicates optimists outnumber pessimists about economic conditions in the coming month. The index tumbled below the benchmark 100 to 99 in June, when fears about the MERS outbreak were at their peak. The Korean government will boost efforts to prevent avian influenza from spreading nationwide during Chuseok, Korea's Thanksgiving holiday, as millions of Koreans are set to hit the road. Working in tandem with other government agencies, the Agriculture Ministry will run an emergency situation room from Saturday and will place quarantine teams on 24-hour standby. Staff will also be stationed to check points to decontaminate vehicles that travel near affected areas. This is because bird flu was detected at duck farms in the country's southwestern Jeollanam-do province last week. For the first case in 3 months, more than 10,000 ducks have already been culled as a preventative measure. The leaders of Korea's two rival parties plan to meet over the upcoming 4-day Chuseok holiday in an attempt to reach a deal on the overall rules for next year's general elections. Sources say the ruling Saenuri Party's chairman, Kim Moo-sung, will propose talks to opposition party leader Moon Jae-in soon. Both parties are interested in specific changes. The ruling party has suggested the rival parties together adopt a bottom-up open primary system to select candidates for the elections instead of the current top-down system. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has so far resisted that idea. It has its own proposal for overhauling the election system. The party wants a region-based proportional representation, saying it will be fairer as it's based on the percentage of votes received in each region. Next year's general elections are set for April. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you, as always, for watching. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.